Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Sprague from Persimmon Health. I am a serial entrepreneur working on healthcare technology that helps more people access better quality of care. This podcast is for the movement of innovators, entrepreneurs, intrapreneurs, and thought leaders that are advancing the American healthcare system through digital health. In this podcast, we highlight real stories of innovators and enablers of digital health, their opportunities, challenges, and learnings for innovation. We'll cover topics such as startup building and fundraising, entrepreneurship, emerging technologies, and big ideas to transform healthcare. We invite you to participate in this community, share your stories, and accelerate the movement. Thank you. We have an awesome pod. Enjoy. Hello, digital health community. Today, our guest is Yishai Knobel, CEO and co-founder of HelpAround. That's helparound.co. HelpAround is described as a gateway that's used to help patients that need specialty drugs get the support they need to fill specialty prescriptions and stay on their therapy. They do this by streamlining what I've recently learned is often a frustrating patient experience that leads to a lot of patients getting lost without the help they need. Yishai, welcome to the pod.
Thank you, Chris. Great to see you and great to be here.
Yes, thank you. So before we unpack specialty patients, I'd love to understand how you came to start HelpAround. Many founders we talk to have personal stories or inspiration to start a company or unique experiences that led to them starting a specific startup. I know in your case, you've led an mHealth platform. You served at Microsoft Startup Lab and were recognized for your, I believe, cyber warfare systems for the Israeli army. What led you into healthcare? And then what led you to start HelpAround?
So as you mentioned, I grew up in Israel. So at the age of, in my late 20s, I moved to the US and to get my master's degree at MIT. And one of the things that after MIT, I passed through Microsoft Startup Labs, which was a lot of fun in Boston. But then I joined Matrix, which is the company that invented the first smartphone glucometer. So it was the first glucose monitor that tested blood sugar into the iPhone. In the early days, this was before Bluetooth LE on the iPhone. Wow. So physical connector, and I joined them to think about connectivity, and interoperability, and how would the fact that you have now a plug-in glucose monitor into the iPhone, how can that connect to all the rest of the services that type 1 diabetes patients consume? And what I was blown away by was how fragmented the American healthcare system is. Unlike the Israeli healthcare system where I grew up, where you have one organization that you choose that manages your health and provides the services and also insures you. So it's all aligned. Whereas in the US, a patient with type 1 diabetes can all of a sudden be switched to a different insulin because their insurance company has a better deal with another manufacturer, which for me, I just couldn't get my head around it. And just to see how many different entities patients have to interact with here was very depressing, but also very encouraging. And it made me start HelpAround with my co-founder it started as a diabetes support network, where patients who were not type 1 diabetes patients who were not able to access supplies for their diabetes management were able to rely on peers. And it was a fascinating journey. We had, tens of thousands of type 1 diabetes patients in the community supporting each other, but we were not able to monetize. First-time entrepreneurs kind of going. It was also when it was very fashionable to go direct to consumer. Don't worry about revenue. Just get the users. In 2018, we turned around the company. We figured out that that alignment was missing with the sponsors in the industry, and we were able to transition the company to focus on the specialty patient journey. So not just, making sure patients get access to therapy, but helping them get on therapy. And as we'll discuss in a bit, more than a quarter of patients in specialty treatments, they get the prescription, but they don't get the therapy. They don't get the drug.
Right. Yeah, that's an amazing stat to me. And gosh, congrats on that pivot. It is
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a big moment to cross for every entrepreneur. And it's a lot easier when you have zero traction. I'm sure when you have this 10,000 strong community, it's really hard to turn or take a detour from your initial vision, but also the people that you've been serving. So really good job on that. But of course,
thank you. It was painful because, we had a lot of people who were really grateful to us as a company that, really helped them when they were in a bind. I'm stuck with the supplies. I can't afford my supplies. I have a specific pump and I need a specific fixture that I can't afford right now. And boom, I find someone who can help me with that. And it was a great story. It was a great feel-good experience. We even built the first emergency button for the Apple Watch that was specifically around like, hey, I'm in distress, help. And, there's a lot of kind of entrepreneurial experiments, but at the end of the day, it wasn't a business. And if other entrepreneurs hear us today, here is follow the money, follow your passion, but follow the money, and do that earlier rather than later. You don't want to be in that position where you're like, you know what, we're doing something great, but it's not sustainable.
Right. So you navigated the market where the business was until you have the current iteration of HelpAround. And I'm curious how your personal journey helped you now that you're encountering or really tackling head on these problems of things like interoperability, et cetera.
Yeah, so interoperability was always a theme in my career, even back in the cyber unit in the Israeli army. Interoperability is always something that is key because we are still dealing with systems that are siloed. We're dealing with them everywhere, and especially in healthcare. So for me, thinking about connecting silos is a second nature in my career, and maybe a little bit also in my personality. So it's not a coincidence that we look at the patient journey, and we look at it as a collection of silos that need to be connected and need to be bridged. And today, part of that challenge that drug manufacturers are facing when trying to help a patient get the therapy, pay for it, learn how to use it, stay on therapy, is because there are so many vendors who are involved in that process. And some of them are, more patient friendly. Some of them are less. Some of them still require you to fax. Some of them are a little more friendly. They would text back and forth. But at the end of the day, for most patient journeys, there are multiple vendors involved.
Okay.
And that means that, and a vendor would be nursing support, copay support, patient assistance program, hub support. There would be all these, I'm not even talking about the pharmacy, especially pharmacy involved. And all of these are first-time interactions for the patient with an organization they're not familiar with. And each one of them has their own rules of engagement. And each one of them has different, compliance requirements under HIPAA, under the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. Yeah, there are different consents required. So it's a very, very complex puzzle that, if one company really spent the time to look at it and say, how do we connect all of these? How do we make this easy for the patients and easy for the brands? Then we can help millions of patients get on life-saving therapies.
Right. That makes sense. And so those silos and all kinds of different vendors, that's just a difference in the reality, I believe, of the specialty drug and patient journey versus the retail patient journey. But can you synthesize that for us? Like from the
Sure.
patient's perspective, like what is the difference between, the CVS Walgreens that a lot of people know and the specialty patient journey?
So let's start with retail.
Okay.
Retail, it's something that we've all been through. We got a
Hmm.
prescription we get, I don't know, I have a muscle ache. I go to the doctor checks it, maybe does an x-ray. Okay, here's a cream. Go to the doctor, go to the pharmacy. And which pharmacy would you like me to send this prescription to, right? Oh,
Hmm.
CVS are on it. Oh, you want CVS on that corner or that corner? Because they have both. Hopefully send it to the right corner, because if not, you're going to have to spend a lot of time chasing them. But I go to CVS, I stand in line, I pay $5
Hmm.
copay, and I go home and I put the cream on, right? That's the
Right.
retail experience. For specialty drugs, it's a way different story. Imagine, God forbid, someone, a parent going with a child. The child is having, difficulties swallowing or digestions, or God forbid, then they go there. They do a lot of tests. It's a long time, and eventually they get diagnosed. And they get diagnosed with a rare disease, or they get diagnosed with Crohn's disease, or with
Hmm.
inflammatory, or any collection of life-changing conditions. And the
Okay.
doctor sits there and said, well, the good news and bad news. First of all, the good news, we know what we have. The bad news is that you have a pretty life-changing condition. And the good news is that there's a drug for it. The bad news, again, is that the drug costs about $300,000 a year.
Wow.
But the good news is that your insurance may cover it. And there's a lot of good news, bad news. So it's like a maze, right? Now, the
Right.
patient doesn't know what to do. Like, who are they going to, how much is going to cost? What's their out of pocket? Who's going to call them? What's a specialty pharmacy? Why can't I get it at the CVS around the corner? Why does it have to be
Hmm.
shipped from some remote location? When they call me, how much am I going to have to pay? Who do I pay? Is my insurance gonna cover this, and to what extent? If I switch in the workplace, am I going to lose this coverage? And what are the side effects? Is my child going to live? Right?
Hmm.
Are we going to have to wake up every night and inject something? I don't know how to inject. So just imagine the experience of someone who is just their life just went upside down, right?
Right.
That's a specialty experience. And for that, you need that help navigating. And it's not
Hmm.
just financial. Financial is one piece of it, but it's the clinical navigation. There is the financial navigation. There is, nurse support. There's, affordability. Are you eligible for this program or for that program? Is there a foundation that supports this? Yeah, there's just
Hmm.
so many questions. And this is the core of the difference in the experience. Now, we're only talking about, it's less than 2% of prescriptions. Less than 2% of prescriptions, but in terms of drug spending,
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
more than 55%
Wow.
of all drug spending. Means that from a drug manufacturer point of view, this is the number one revenue driver, not the cream that you put on your shoulder.
Right.
The number one revenue driver are those drugs. And that's why pharma invests so much in trying to help patients get on therapy, and still it's so siloed.
Right, right. Yeah, I think I read in an article you wrote that it's something like $76 billion per year
That's
in
right.
lost revenue just because there's so much friction. And I guess you answered one of my questions is, are they trying to do anything about it? Because clearly that moves the needle. I'm curious as to why aren't they successful in breaking these silos, or breaking people out of these silos?
So part of it is structural. From a
Okay.
regulatory point of view, pharma is bound by regulation that, to a large extent, prevents them from even interacting with the patient
Okay.
unless they get
Okay.
explicit consent. From another, structurally, especially pharmacy does not, they have a certain contract with the drug manufacturer, but also have a contract with the payer,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So these are two separate entities, and the drug company has only so much leverage over specialty pharmacies to make sure that they provide the patient all the resources the patient is eligible for, right? So
Right.
that's just
Hmm.
another one. Now look at copay card. Copay card is another program that the pharma company can put out there, but next to it, there's patient assistance program. That's a completely separate program that still is sponsored by the pharma company, but only those who are eligible.
Okay.
Okay. So, and pharma companies that, a patient assistance program means money that basically the pharma pays for, just sells drugs for free to certain eligible patients. So there are a lot there's a lot of work here that needs to be done, and in connecting the different programs. And as a pharma company that launches one drug with this permutation of vendors, and the next drug with that permutation of vendors, because this drug is designed more for a population of migraine users, right? And other patients. The other one is for rare disease. The third one is for HIV. Different populations. So the drug company, in a way, is now kind of coming to the place where to say, okay, we need infrastructure for this. We need infrastructure to allow us to build any patient journey in a way that doesn't require us to reinvent the wheel.
Right. Yeah, each and every time with all the different myriad vendors. And then from the patient's perspective, what happens? Are they just kind of lost in the sea of consents and diagnostics and waiting, and then more consents? And I mean, I'm not a specialty patient, but I don't know how many times I feel like I'm signing the same form a few times anyways, just as I'm being passed around. Is that what's happening?
So that's what you would want to happen. But the patient, what you're experiencing, again, as a retail patient, is that you go to the doctor and the doctor gives you forms, or maybe you're using a certain digital platform at the doctor's office. But the pharma doesn't have that handshake with you, right? They don't have that opportunity. You don't come into GlaxoSmithKline headquarters and say, hello, I would like to buy your drug. It's like, okay, sign here. No, there's no that kind of interaction. So the hurdle is higher for the drug manufacturer because there's no direct touch point. There's the provider, there's the pharmacist, and that's it. So yeah, I think that's a challenge. But the challenge is, like, if you digitize it, then there are ways to get that signature and to unlock all these services for the patient and create that handshake between the drug manufacturer and the patient.
Okay. Right. And let's talk about HelpAround and how does it help with that specialty patient journey or to build those?
So we basically built infrastructure. It's a connectivity infrastructure that allows any drug company to connect the patient journey. You have, as I mentioned earlier, you have this different combinations of support vendors, call centers, co-pay providers, hubs, all these different combinations of vendors for each drug. And you basically have infrastructure that you can put in place and basically connect the dots, wire it digitally in a way that doesn't require you to reinvent the wheel. So that's what basically HelpAround does. HelpAround comes and creates that one connector bridge. We call it the patient journey gateway.
Okay.
That A, connects all the vendors, and B, centralizes the communication to the patient. So the patient have a very predictable step-by-step roadmap to get on therapy. Okay. And it's not that one patient sends them a text message, one vendor sends that patient a text message, another vendor calls them, another vendor sends them a DocuSign. No, it's all centralized, it's all consistent, it's branded for that specific drug. And for the patient, it makes sense. I went home, I got a text message that says, you don't need to download the app, of course. You get a text message that says, hey, your doctor just prescribed this drug for you. We need your consent to provide you the following services. Check, 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 check. And you're done. And as a patient point of view, I'm not looking to build a relationship with a drug company. I'm not looking to build a relationship with anyone. All I want is my child to be healthy. So just tell me what I need to do in order to get this drug as cheaply as possible. And that's it. And just get me the drug.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And can you break down, I think you mentioned earlier about a quarter of patients who receive a prescription don't even fill it for the first time.
Abandonment,
How
that's
would
right.
HelpAround build an experience for that?
So one of the biggest reasons why patients don't pick up the prescription is because A, they don't know where to pick it up. They don't know where to get it. B,
Okay.
they hear the cost and they're like, I can't pay for this. Goodbye. I'm just not going to take the drug. Wait, so can you imagine having a life-changing condition and you're like, I just can't pay for this, no matter what.
Right.
And there, by the way, some fantastic organizations and companies that are focused specifically on that financial navigation and allow even the health system to look for the right affordability path for this specific patient based on their profile. Okay, so that really helps in the abandonment rate. But still, more than a quarter of patients abandon the prescription because A, they don't know how to pay for it. B, or they get phone calls and they never answer the phone because they don't recognize the number. It's as simple as that. So there are a lot of friction points like that that are peppered throughout the journey, and the patient can fall through the cracks in every one of those unless it's made really, really easy.
Got it. Yeah. And in speaking of making things easy, I've also seen you speak about one of the topics du jour, which is omni-channel, and meeting people where they expect to be met or in ways they can actually be reached. Could you explain what omni-channel means in the context of HelpAround and maybe both retail and specialty?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the landscape of patient engagement, if you will, has changed quite a bit. It started with, this avalanche of apps in the first or the second 5 years of the previous decade. And then at some point, people just became tired of apps. And very few of them actually are willing to download an app, especially the younger generation. It's like, download an app? I don't want to. And there's a really interesting stat that I mentioned, that's about 79% of consumers in general stop a transaction if they're being prompted to download an app. So if I'm at a restaurant and they're telling me, please pay your check, right? Pay your bill with this, and download an app to pay your bill. Why? Take my credit card, leave me alone. Right? Or if it's a one-off transaction, I'm not going to download any app. I expect a frictionless, very lightweight experience. Okay? Unless this is TikTok, which I engage a lot. Unless this is Uber, that I engage a lot. Unless this is an organization that I really have an ongoing relationship with. Okay? The problem here is that who is the patient really having a relationship with? With the doctor? Maybe. With that doctor or with that doctor? With the primary care or with the specialist? With the pharmacy? But that's not the pharmacy. That's a specialty pharmacy. It's a whole another organization. With the manufacturer of the drug? Who are they? I don't know them. I, as a patient, I don't have a relationship with anyone here. So I'm looking for a very lightweight experience. Just text me, because text is king. Give me a link. Let me sign, and goodbye. Now, for a certain subset, especially when we work in rare disease, and we launched some great some programs that support phenomenal treatments, really just life-changing treatments in pediatric liver disease, pediatric neurology, and those parents actually want to have a relationship with a case manager. For those, we do offer an app option, but it's whatever you choose. And that's what I mean by omni-channel. If you want to meet the patient where they are, if they want phone calls, they should get phone calls. If they want text, they should get text. If they want app, they should get app. And it's easy enough today. That's what we build the infrastructure so that any drug company can come and say, I want this combination of engagements because that's right for my population. Right?
Right.
And for another drug, for that, I don't really need. Don't worry about it. Right? So oncology is different from rare disease. It's different from neurology. Is different from migraine, and you need to have that flexibility because every patient is different. One of my favorite quotes that I heard once was a CEO of Sanofi, the pharma company. He said, I've never seen a global customer in my life. Meaning every customer, there's no one customer that, is all, no, every customer has their own specific, wrinkles.
Persona, yeah.
But it's your job to be there in the specific way that they like to consume the service.
Right. Yeah, I love that perspective. And I guess I should have clarified earlier for our audience, specialty drugs. You've mentioned rare diseases, you've mentioned oncology. What are the use cases for specialty drugs as opposed to what I go to Walgreens for?
Yeah, so these are really the life-changing diseases, life-changing diagnoses, and these are the more potent drugs. So, for example, for asthma, you can have an inhaler, which is very affordable, or you can have an injection if you have severe asthma. Okay. For bone density, you can take a pill, which is usually retail, or you go and get an injection that is really going to, it's a much stronger intervention. Okay. Oncology, very often specialty. And specialty is a certain designation of drugs that typically require special handling, usually the more expensive. There are more steps that need to be handled. And the key is that, because the population is not that widespread, then it's not that your CVS or Walgreens is going to have it at every store. Because you have maybe, for a rare disease, you may have only 1,000 patients throughout the country. Right? For another disease, you even may have 50,000 or 100,000 patients around the country. That still doesn't justify having that drug stored in all these retail locations. So that's why there's a entirely different set of pharmacies that are called specialty pharmacies that handle these types of drugs. So hopefully, most of our audience has not had the need to interact with any specialty prescriptions. First of all, from a health point of view, and second, from an administrative point of view, it's just a nightmare.
Right. And so you've been working with a number of customers to improve this patient experience. But I'm curious, as your business or when you're serving them, how do you measure the impact or success of HelpAround?
So the two main metrics are, first of all, how many patients actually get on therapy, succeed in getting on therapy. And the second is the speed to therapy.
Speed to therapy.
So how long does it take to get a patient on therapy? And it's as ridiculous as a person who got a prescription and it took them 3 months to get on therapy. Now, some drug companies, drug manufacturers say, well, it's the insurance. We started the insurance coverage process, the prior auth, and the insurance company put all these, you got to go through step therapy, meaning first you need to go through another drug, or first denial, and you got to prove XYZ before you're eligible for this, because these are very expensive drugs. But the reality is that there's a lot that can be done in parallel, and the proof is in the pudding. When we launched, HelpAround supports a rare disease therapy that for an equivalent one without HelpAround, I think it took like 2 months to get on therapy. And we shaved 45 days from that period. So it took only 2 weeks instead of 2 months. And that just shows that if you just connect the wires to correctly, then you're going to have then you can really get patients on therapy much faster. And that's a win-win. It's a win for the patient, of course. It's a win for the drug manufacturer. It's also a win, of course, for the pharmacy, but it's also a win for the insurance company. And the reason is that if a patient is eligible from the point of view of the insurance company, if the patient is eligible for a certain treatment, get them on that treatment ASAP. Because if you wait and that patient ends up in the hospital, 1 day of hospitalization is going to cost you more than the whole year.
Right. Gosh, yeah, no, and I love you pointing that out because, as you know, in healthcare, there are often so many misaligned incentives in this mix of patients, providers, payers, and pharma. And just love that you're tackling a problem where truly everyone's incentives are aligned.
Which is a very
Um,
unusual,
yes.
a combination of circumstances. Because as you mentioned, this is one of the biggest, I think, tragedies of our healthcare system, is that there are misalignments, and the
Hmm.
patient
Hmm.
ends up being the one in the middle that is left holding the bag.
Right, right, and left on the side when it comes to their patient experience. And now, yeah, it'd be kind of ironic that your product is a platform that helps build these better patient experiences, and it just works because of these aligned incentives. Now, speaking of connecting the wires, HelpAround is a gateway or really a platform. Like, who are the customers that adopt the platform, and what do they need to do to adopt it?
So if drug companies, when they launch either when they launch a drug or when they notice that they're losing patients, so
Hmm.
you know, and patients receive the prescription, but only 75% of them actually get the therapy. Those
Right.
drug manufacturers work with us to
Hmm.
deploy a suite of tools across
Hmm.
their assets, and
Okay.
those are connected to one gateway. And
Okay.
that one gateway also messages the patient, makes sure that the patient is kept fully informed
Right.
in regards to where they are in the process and what they have to do in terms of next steps. So we partner with the drug manufacturers, but then of course we also have links to e-prescribe platforms, to especially
Hmm.
pharmacies, a lot of other stakeholders that are reaching out to the patient and also want to get the patient on therapy, and to really create that win-win.
Right. Got it. And so you guys have built, I guess, probably a bunch of easy ways or connectors, ways to plug and play
That's right.
with your system. And then I believe also create a custom patient facing experience, whether that's branding or that's workflow.
Both.
Is that right? Okay.
That's exactly right. So when we work with a drug manufacturer, we look
Hmm.
very closely at the patient journey, and we
Hmm.
work with them to figure out what are the best ways, like which hooks are right for
Hmm.
them. And we
Hmm.
have a suite of hooks, if you will, and APIs that basically allow to connect to the different vendors. And we are already connected to most of the vendors that you would have heard about. We already work with them. We're already compatible with them, and they're compatible with us. Meaning, as a pharma
Hmm.
company, they come and say, and I'll come and say, "Hey, I have this copay vendor and this hub."
Hmm.
They're
Hmm.
like, "It's already wired into the HelpAround gateway. You actually don't even need to do anything; just turn it on."
Right. Gosh, that's an amazing place to get to as a company when you find that the majority of conversations are easy ones because, oh, hey, this really will work relatively out of the box. And I'm sure it was quite a journey to get to that point. But once you do, man, that is such a huge moat because we know like integration projects go to die when you start working with a bunch of different vendors and everyone's trying to coordinate and not everyone's as aligned. But that's awesome. Now, on the other side
Thank
of
you.
the equation for the so we've talked about the patient experience and those improvements. Now on the pharma side, what additional insights into their patients do they get once they've adopted HelpAround?
So one of the things that drug manufacturers crave the most is data about their patient journey.
Okay.
And typically, what drug manufacturers get is the historical data that they get from either the data aggregators that connects to all the pharmacies and tells them,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we got X prescriptions, but only X minus actually picked it up or actually were delivered, actually paid. But then they don't
Mm-hmm.
know where they lost the patient. They don't know
Right.
whether these patients gave up because of price? Did they give up because the pharmacy called them and they didn't pick up? Maybe the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
prior authorization process is still stuck somewhere and the patient is on
Right.
hold. So all of a sudden we are unlocking this view to the patient journey that the pharma company has never had before. And we tell them, guys,
Mm-hmm.
you had all these assumptions about your population. For example, one of my favorite one is like, old people don't use mobile phones, right? Wrong.
Okay.
Completely wrong. All right, people, my parents and your parents and like everybody's parents, that's how they get the pictures of the grandkids. So they get text messages, they click through it, and yes, sometimes they hit dial, but the pharma doesn't know that. They have a lot of market research, but they don't know this information about their own patients, right? I'll give another example. You know, let's say that a drug company that makes a drug for oncology. Okay, could be breast cancer, could be something else, and they have, you know, and there's a variety, right? Women can get breast cancer at the age of 30, 40, or it can be at 50 or 60 or 70. Who interacts with the patient support program? The patient or the caregiver? They don't know.
Right.
They don't know. Suddenly they can know. Suddenly they know. I'll give another example. We have a rare disease, pediatric rare disease program that we're supporting.
Okay.
How many caregivers manage more than one sibling? It's a genetic rare disease. How many of them have siblings that have the exact same condition? Now, that's kind of actually difficult to measure unless you have one view of the patient journey.
Right.
And in that case, you can actually see that data. So it really puts the control in the hands of the people who developed this drug that is changing so many lives and is now out there really in the real world. And they actually get a firsthand view to their patients and to the actual patient journey and where patients engage and where they disengage.
Right. Yeah, I think that's brilliant. I mean, a lot of the applications we build, you start with an MVP and then you let product analytics, like Google Analytics Mixpanel, really drive you in knowing what's actually working. And as you experiment with new things, is it improving or not? And tracking all these different cohorts, right, down their conversion funnels, like checking out of your, let's say, retail shop. And I can't imagine flying a startup without that kind of insight. And now I'm thinking from a pharma's perspective, where instead of a 2-step checkout process, it's a 10-step checkout process. And
you're not the retailer. You're not the retailer, so you don't know, right? You put a product out there, but you have all these intermediaries. Now, I will tell you more than that. I think it's the tide is shifting even more, because there are a few gatekeepers that stand between any business and the consumer, and that's Apple. Right. Now, you know, they own our experience now, right? And you know, Amazon on the shopping side that stands between retailers and the consumer, Google on the Android side. You have all these gatekeepers on the way that constrain the way that you can interact with the patient or with the consumer. And that puts yet another barrier between the drug manufacturer and the patient. So you got to be smart when you build a gateway to a patient journey. The gateway has to take into account what Apple iOS allows you to do and what it doesn't allow you to do. For example, remember the whole like ask app not to track you? You know, the whole privacy campaign that Apple put out there. It's a real thing. It's a real thing. And if you're just going to build an app out there and hope for the best, you know, Apple is changing the requirements of apps all the time. Even text messages are, you know, starting to be trickier and trickier to get to consumers. So this is why drug manufacturers need to think. First of all, look at the whole patient journey holistically and engage instead of silo by silo by silo. Oh, I need a hub, check. I need a copay, check. I need a pharmacy, check. Really? Are you really just going to shoot the patient in all directions and hope for the best?
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great analogy, and I'm glad you brought up these tech titans that are entering the healthcare industry. I'm just curious, what impact you think they'll have on the healthcare industry. I mean, I think Amazon, it's probably early days, and then Google and Apple control different segments of mobile and wearables. Yeah, what do you think about them getting into the market?
So I think, Apple and Google, gatekeepers of the
Hmm.
patient experience. They have the front line to the
Right.
patient. They control and mainly curate.
Hmm.
They basically throw your whatever offering
Hmm.
healthcare vendors, healthcare providers, or drug companies have. Now Apple is going to look at it, or Google will come and say, okay, but you're just one. What do I have on my phone? What does the consumer have on the phone? They have Netflix, they have Uber, they have TikTok, they have I'm afraid to say Facebook, they have Twitter. Oh, and they also have this healthcare app from the
Hmm.
provider. What's more important?
Right.
Are you going to be categorized as a needed service? Oh, you have an airline, right? A boarding pass. Okay, so now you basically have Apple sitting there, and curating. Oh, I'm gonna allow these apps to collect data, not collect data. What permissions is the patient gonna have to collect? Am I gonna allow the app to send, messages, or do they have to collect explicit permission from the patient? Oh, by the
Hmm.
way, Apple, and this is one of my favorite examples, is we just wrote about it in recently on MedCity.
Okay.
Apple just took functionality that was a favorite on drug manufacturer and made it native to iOS, and that's
Hmm.
medication tracking. So your
Right.
medication reminders. There used to be a lot of apps, still are a lot of
Hmm.
apps that help you remember to take medications. Guess what? Now it's built into iOS native. So think of that as like this is the role of the gatekeepers between
Hmm.
you, whatever service provider you are, and the patient. Now, how do you navigate that?
Hmm.
You navigate that by thinking about this through all the touch points you could potentially have. Mobile is the number one,
Hmm.
right? Is
Right.
number one. If you look at any drug company, the website, 80% of the traffic is mobile.
Okay.
80% of the traffic comes from mobile phones. So that has a huge change now. So that Android and Apple, that's on that gatekeeper. Now what's Amazon going to do? Amazon's going to do what it's best at, which is retail. They bought a pharmacy, right? They are
Hmm.
they bought PillPack. They bought Whole Foods. They buy retail. They expand in
Right.
retail, and when people shop, they shop through Amazon. How is that going to affect you as someone who sells something direct to consumer or a service direct to consumer? Google search, right? I mean that's the old use of how ZocDoc became a big
Hmm.
venue, after WebMD, and had to deal with the gatekeeper, which was Google. So all of these are the gatekeepers. They're here to stay. They're not going anywhere. And I encourage any entrepreneur who's thinking about a new service offering in the healthcare space to really consider the gatekeepers that they have to deal with, because it could be make or break.
Okay, got it. And given these new gatekeepers are coming in and evolving, but also, you're demonstrating the impact on the patient experience that you can have if you're very intentional about it. What do you think the future of the digital patient experience looks like?
Oh, it's a big question. What does it look like? I'll tell you. One of the most famous quotes
Okay.
was by Jack Dorsey from Twitter.
Hmm.
He said, "Technology needs eventually to disappear." What does it mean? And I think he was talking about the iPhone or the iPad. He said, when you're sitting on the iPad, you're not realizing that you're sitting on an iPad. You're just consuming content and you're watching a show and you're like, right, you don't notice that technology has to disappear. And if we do our job right, if we do a good job, we, the health tech industry, we would get closer to having the systems disappear from the healthcare experience. You know, just like, hey, I go and talk to the doctor today in the age after COVID. I go to the doctor on my screen. I'm not thinking to myself, oh, I'm going to log into that telemedicine portal in order to talk to my doctor. I just go to talk to the doctor, right? It's on my screen. So the technology disappeared. And telemedicine today, finally was able to get there because of COVID. So the same thing is going to be with my Apple Watch and my phone. If services really do a good job handshaking with the patient, engaging them, the patient is not going to think, oh, I need to download the app. That would get me to that tracking, right? The patient is just going to engage the service. And imagine a world where digital therapeutics is going to do such a good job where you wake up in the morning and it's like, okay, well, here's your sleep metric. And I don't even remember what technology I'm using for that. It's just going to be there.
Right. Yeah, no, I love that vision of the future. And as you know, Yishai, a lot of our audience are entrepreneurs that are trying to create that future digital experience. And I would love to just end with a few questions that I have on their behalf.
Sure.
So I guess my first question is, at Persimmon, we work with healthcare startups across their journey. We generally break it into kind of 3 stages: showing proof that an idea has value, to achieving a viable product, to attaining scale with more customers or offerings once you know you have a viable product. And I loved at the beginning of HelpAround, you had something that, yes, it had value, but was it ever going to be a viable business? I'm curious, what's different now, or really, when did you know that you had a viable product and a viable product market fit business with HelpAround?
That is such a difficult question that is at the core of every entrepreneurial journey, which is why you guys exist, right? Because it is just so hard to put your finger on the right place, and it's especially difficult in a network effect type of business where you need buy-in from different parts of the ecosystem in order to know, it's like, oh, wait, that is clicking and this is clacking, right? This is like, there's that network on both sides working here. So I don't know if I can put my finger on the one place, but there were many different moments. But I think the key is, one of the key moments was where we were able to look at the data and say, 1, 2, 3. In this case, we beat the benchmark. In this case, we beat the benchmark. In this case, we beat the benchmark. That's a moment where, frankly, this is also what the investor is looking for. Investors want to come and say, show me that it's working. Show me that it's working. The second piece, and I might flip the order. The first piece is someone is willing to pay. Someone is willing to pay. If someone is offering you a free pilot, end the conversation right there. Stop. Just like, okay, there's no value. No. If someone is not going to pay you for whatever you're offering them, you're barking up the wrong tree.
Got it. Yeah, no, I know. And it's easy to get intoxicated with that promise or those MOUs that, okay, yeah, I find your idea really interesting. And then, some people find out the hard way that that's only slightly a better signal than your mom telling you that you have a good idea, right?
Pretty much. Pretty much. And I would encourage, I would encourage any entrepreneur, first-time entrepreneur, to map out the path from someone saying yes to the customer paying. because there's a big gap between someone saying yes and someone paying. Now, map that out step by step and do it with the customer.
Right.
And until then, you have nothing.
Right. Got it. Yeah. And that's funny. That's what HelpAround does for the specialty too.
Right.
Patients.
Now we just need HelpAround for entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
awesome. So final question. And, you know, I think every entrepreneur finds out how important it is to have a great team. I'm curious what you look for in your team members. And is there anyone you'd like to highlight that kind of has those qualities?
So my team is that's always hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, on the journey you have different parts of the journey, and the company changes and people change, but there are some people that, you know, have been there from the beginning. My co-founder, CTO, Shlomi. I mean, it was a long journey, and we both our personal life changed, right? We're now in different countries. We're now in different worlds, and you know, we have different commitment, different obligations. I would point out the person who actually today has her 5-year anniversary at HelpAround, and that Lindsay Tauber, that hopefully is listening to us, and her adaptability, her ability to adapt and to reinvent herself. And I think Lindsay basically went from having zero technical background to being our point product person. And she runs basically our product development, and with all the, you know, the teams and development. So it's just a huge growth. So look for people that demonstrate growth, that they're looking for growth, that they're always looking to change, that they adapted. If that person is an entrepreneur, and it doesn't matter if they succeeded or not, if they gave it a shot,
right,
you want them. And I also give big props to people who moved countries, because moving a country is a very entrepreneurial experience, and that shows a lot of adaptability. But, you know, other than that, I think if you're looking for, you know, as you build a team, as the WHO method says, first of all, write down what you're looking for before you start talking to people. What is it that you're looking for? Why? And how are you going to probe for these traits?
Okay. Got it. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And of course, the life of a startup, as you discovered with HelpAround, is you're going to need to adapt, or as Mike Tyson famously said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Exactly.
So yeah, who you want around you is the people that are talented and can adapt with you, and are along for that journey.
Exactly.
Yishai, thank you for being on the pod. Thank you for all of your fighting for a better patient experience. I learned a lot. I'll be rooting for you, and I'm betting our audience learned a lot, and we'll be rooting for you too.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you, Bimal. Really had a lot of fun, and thank you for letting me share our journey.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this podcast and being a part of this movement. This podcast is brought to you by Persimmon Health, an offering by Leapfrog Technology that's purpose-built to help innovators imagine, build, and scale digital health products. We're passionate about fixing healthcare and have worked on over 50 digital health products. If you want to share your story or want to work together, please shoot an email to hello@persimmonhealth.com. Thank you once again, and I look forward to seeing you on the next podcast.